It's really nice that we have this space which is kind of very circular. Everything works together and you know, nature supports the individuals just as the individuals are here supporting the site.
Welcome to the Carbon Copy podcast with me, Isabel Sparrow. Episode 5, Returning to Our Trees. Recent studies suggest that as many as 1 in 7 people in the UK are currently struggling with poor mental health. There are many factors that contribute to this, and everyone's experience is personal to them, but the cost of living crisis, poor physical health, isolation and loneliness, and experiences of trauma can all play a part. For this episode, producer Brad visits a project in South Wales that's supporting people to improve their mental health and providing educational opportunities for local children struggling in mainstream schools. We learn about the benefits of green social prescribing and the opportunities it presents for communities and healthcare providers alike, and we discover how understanding and appreciating nature is an ancient part of the Welsh psyche.
My name is Janis Werrett. I'm the director of Cynon Valley Organic Adventures in Abercynon in Mountain Ash. My background is I've taught for a number of years. I grew up locally in the valleys. I wasn't a lover of education during my school years, but when I went back then to college, to university, I really enjoyed it and I became a teacher. I was approached in 2018 by a couple of local people to take on this derelict site and to turn it into something that would benefit the community. The site that we're at currently had been stood empty for 7 years. There were just brambles everywhere. It was in a state of disrepair. So yeah, I put in a tender for the site. I didn't know what I would do with it at that point, to be honest with you, because it was in such a bad way. So the first thing I did was to turn it into a college, because that was where my area of expertise was. And I brought in a couple of local people to volunteer with me, and we just began sort of cutting it back and tending to the land.
The initiative has now been up and running for 6 years and works closely with local councils, healthcare organisations and educational institutions. It was also involved in a research project with Cardiff University around social prescribing. Social prescribing is the practice of linking patients to activities, groups and services in their community to help improve their health and well-being, as an alternative or complementary option to medication. Andrew Cuthbert, a former academic at the university who now sits on Cynon Organic Adventures board, explains more.
I was at Cardiff University. I've been there for about 8 years. I ended up in this project called Accelerate, which is a big fund that invested in research in organisations across the world involved in some kind of healthcare. And Janis's project came to us through a local contact that she had. And we invested in research and some equipment for the organisation. We built a nature trail through and did some inquiries into the history and the archaeology and the botany of the site. And they also did some research in social prescribing. They wanted to understand social prescribing, how it relates to organisations like this. It was very new to me, social prescribing, because I'd worked sort of 35 years in academia and in the healthcare sector, and it was always a very medical model of mental health care and treatment. And I'd had my own experiences of that as well, of medication and psychotherapy and things. And then I discovered these alternative ways of prescribing people to do something that meant something to them locally within their community, that interested them, and leading to improvements in their mental health and their sort of view of themselves and their relationship to their community and the world. And it was particularly interesting, the sort of a connection we put people out in nature and walking groups, all sorts of activities, craft, outdoor crafts and things. And the evidence that was accumulated showed that actually did have real proven benefits.
For social prescribing to work, there needs to be connection and collaboration within communities. Sarah Williams, a primary care doctor and climate lead for the Royal College of GPs in Wales, told us this was something particularly important in this part of the world.
What we've got is a lot of community-based treatments and community programmes trying to grow with what the community needs. A lot of that comes from the strength of Welsh communities. They've had to face a lot of adversity over the years, but the strength in a Welsh community is knowing your neighbour and working with your neighbour and supporting them through it. And often, I think what Welsh communities do, they would sooner be with friends with somebody and help them out than try and profit from them. And I think that's why Wales is special in the way that it's trying to deliver community-based programmes.
I get the sense that this supportive and friendly approach is also really embedded in the way they do things at Cynon Valley. Here's Janis again, speaking about the way the project works with schools locally.
We do work with a lot of schools in the borough, depending on what they need really. If it's, I mean, we've even had primary schools sending us children for their well-being, you know, because their anxiety was so bad, they couldn't go to school. So they would come to us, you know, just for a few hours a week until they were able to go back to school. Obviously, they don't really have a lot of a budget for those kinds of things. So it's, you know, we do that for free for them. And they do things for us, you know, they'll do collections for toilet roll holders for us to plant the beans. The parents will bring down empty jars for us to make jams and things.
Okay, nice.
So, yeah.
So there's a bit of a circular economy
Yeah,
going on.
yeah.
That's nice, yeah.
And to be honest, we do prefer to work in that way. You know, we work in that way with other organisations as well. It's like, it's not so much about, you know, about them giving us money for things. We'd much rather work in a way where, you know, where we can call on you if we need help, and, you know, we all support each other with the skills that we've got.
I've come across a lot of Welsh projects shared with Carbon Copy that make the connection between nature and well-being. I wondered if there was something significant about the culture and history of Wales that could explain this. Here's Sarah again.
The Welsh language is one of the oldest living languages. There's a phrase that means a lot to people in green prescribing in Wales, because I think it really describes the feeling of what people are trying to achieve. So, dod ynni ôl at ffin a goed. What it means, it's a Welsh phrase for return to my trees. And the literal translation of that actually means returning to a balanced state of mind. And so I think there is that element of green social prescribing is tapping into that deeper part of where we've come from, and we come from people who were around trees a lot more, and trees were much more part of their daily environment.
I'm keen to learn more about Cynon Valley Organic Adventures, so here's producer Brad sharing his experience of visiting the initiative.
Thanks, Izzy. When I first arrived at the project, I was quite shocked by how big the site was. It seemed that every bit of the land had a different purpose and was being used by different groups in the community. I asked Janis to show me around, and we walked through large wooded areas and passed by the wellbeing and university lab huts, said hello to some pigs and chickens, saw the food that was being grown outside and in the large polytunnels, and the spaces where Janis did work with local schools and groups. Whilst we walked, we chatted about the work that she does here.
As soon as I became a teacher, the first thing I did was go into community teaching to engage local people in education, particularly the ones that wouldn't typically engage in education. We have some individuals here 5 days a week, some will come in 1 day a week, and in terms of the qualifications that we offer, they tend to be around environmental sustainability, horticulture, community forestry. So yeah, it very much comes down to what the individual wants to do, you know, long term. In this area, we run forest school for home educated children. From the very first year that I set the garden up, we've always used this space to do summer activities for local children as well. Yeah. And they absolutely love it. It's always surprised me how interested the children are in the environment. You know, and how they get very upset when they see pollution in the river and things like that.
So Brad, was there anything that surprised you about the project or the work that Janis is doing?
Yeah, I think one thing that impressed me was how much she seemed to value every plant, every bit of wildlife in the space. Even things that we'd consider to be weeds are being used in various ways. Everything
that grows here grows in abundance. And some of these plants, I wouldn't be able to get rid of them even if I wanted to. Yeah. So it's a case of having to look at uses for them. And when I began to look into that, I realised that everything here is of use, really. You know, there doesn't have to be any waste. We don't have to be digging these up and disposing of them. There's a use for everything you can find in the garden.
So was it a case of literally like you just almost like one by one, you'd like,
yeah,
what's that plant, what can I do with it, and you just kind of work.
Yeah, there's been a massive increase in interest, I think, in weeds and the medicinal and nutritional benefits of weeds. So we do foraging walks as well, where we teach people about those things. You've got rose bay willow herb, for example. That was one of the earliest, that was one of the biggest imports in the 1800s to the country, and it was used as a tea. And it's really good for men for prostate issues, and it has 90% more vitamin C than oranges.
Thanks, Brad. That's all really interesting. We'll hear more from Brad's visit to the project later in the episode. It sounds like plants can do a lot for our physical health, but I was interested to hear more about the connection between spending time in green spaces and mental health in particular. In an earlier episode of the pod, Bigger Than All of Us, several of my guests cited access to nature as a key driver of psychological well-being. So I'd like to know, what does the research say about this? Here's Sarah with more.
We know all the evidence shows that being in nature reduces blood pressure, the feeling of chronic pain, it reduces multiple things for mental health. We've got evidence, but also I think the evidence doesn't give us all the answers. I think there is so much more to be gained by being out in nature. We know that it reduces anxiety. We know that being in fresh air is better for you. We know that pollution is linked with suicide, and living in polluted environments is not good for your mental health. By having chance to go to green spaces, to be amongst the trees, we know that the trees are giving you fresher air, and that's really important for your health. There's lots of evidence to show that they give off lots of natural anti-inflammatories, that your lungs are built to absorb some of that. We still carry those receptors in our lungs, and there's evidence to show that if you walk around a Scotch pine tree, one of our native firs, months later, if you can do a blood test, you can still pick up your body's response to being around that tree. So the links to trees are much more in our DNA than probably we could ever imagine. If you've got somewhere like Cynon Organics, where you've got all this greenery, growth, foliage, fresh flowers, lots and lots of trees, that's all working really, really hard to give you fresh air. And it's really important that people have the chance to get to fresh air.
As well as his work with Janis's project, Andrew has conducted research with similar initiatives around the impact that social prescribing can have on well-being.
But I worked on a couple of other projects that looked at changes in people's well-being over time. So people engage in a social prescribed project over several weeks. So they come along and do an activity once a week. And we provide them with questionnaires about just sort of general, straightforward questionnaires about their mental well-being or their connectedness or the sense of themselves. Do that at the beginning of the programme and then do it again at the end and look at the difference between the two. And other people have done very similar things, and Wells are very strong on that. And there's some really strong evidence. We had a project up in the Brecon Beacons where there was an overall about a 50% improvement in people's general mental well-being over an 8-week course, doing traditional crafts outdoors and a mixture of that and gardening and mindfulness, all wrapped up on a day in a beautiful mountain setting.
One person with lived experience of this impact is Mike Jenkins, a volunteer who worked closely with Janis to get Cynon Valley to where it is today, and has now moved on to a new role at another local project helping support community-led environmental activities. Mike told Brad about the journey he'd been on and how Cynon Valley Organic Adventures had helped him out of a dark place.
So my name is Mike, I'm 68 years old. I first became involved with Cynon Valley Organics approximately 5 years ago. So I was doing all, looking after the polytunnels, growing all the vegetables, the fruits, and doing all the structural work here. Basically, I walked out of my job, I had a bit of a breakdown. I felt as if I was at the end of my tether, I just hit a brick wall basically. So I went down to the doctors. He gave me a couple of weeks off. I returned to work. I had a bit of an issue in work and I walked out of my job and just packed it in. And I went back to the doctors and he gave me some phone numbers and some leaflets to get some help. So I went to see mental health coordinator, Julie Nomas, her name was. And I was a bit reluctant to come here. And about 3 weeks later, I decided to give it a try. So that was the start of my journey then. From a mental health point of view, I think if it brought out the person in me, because I was a very shy, quiet person anyway. I'm a different person than what I was 5 years ago. I think it gave me, Janis and the work that I was doing here, gave me a lot of confidence. It built me up. It built me up. Yeah, and I found it quite relaxing, doing the gardening side of it, and the growing of the vegetables. I think being outdoors is a big stress reliever. Definitely, and I think it's definitely good for your mental health. I wish I have done something like that a long time ago.
Janis spoke of a similar experience with her mental health and how tending to the garden has helped.
For me, when I was in that dark place very early on, I kept having to face triggers, you know. I was going around in cycles. I kept facing the same issues over and over, but I was very aware of that. Over the last year or two, I've been a lot more active in the gardening side of it, you know, and in growing the vegetables and things, and I'm totally obsessed with it. As soon as I wake, I dream about plants. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I'm here ready to water them. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I like to think of myself as the plant midwife, you know.
Is there an area that you say is like your sort of your favourite spot to be in?
The potting shed.
Potting shed. Why the potting shed?
Because that's where I get to start off all the seeds and then to transplant them, and you know, and then to fill the polytunnels. It's just, yeah, I can't wait to go in there in the mornings, you know, to see what's grown overnight.
Is it also quite nice little quiet space for
it is.
Me time?
It is, yeah, nobody else can fit in there.
Unfortunately, not everyone is lucky enough to have access to safe green spaces like those at Cynon Valley Organic Adventures. Sarah tells us more about this.
We know that women and young families can feel scared sometimes in the situations that they live in, if it's poorly lit and it's unsafe. So that can have a real impact on children accessing safe spaces. So we have to really be much more mindful of really delivering and supporting policy to give people safe places. We know that lone female runners, a big part of female obesity, you know, can be around actually not accessing safe green spaces if you're living in cities. And you can't actually get to safe green spaces to run. That's a real impact. So, you know, whilst we're trying to endorse ecotherapies, we have to work locally as a community to actually build them and make them safe places as well, because I think everybody would do it a lot more if they felt safer. So somewhere like Cynon Organics offers a safe, supported space for that.
As well as her work with the Royal College of GPs, Sarah is a clinical lead at Green Health Wales, a network focused on improving sustainability in the sector. With projects like Janis's providing a clear opportunity for clinicians, I wanted to know if there were any barriers to rolling out green social prescribing more widely.
So at the moment, green social prescribing in Wales, we've got some policy from Welsh Government, and we've got loads of clinicians, NHS staff that want to do it. What we've got at the moment is a bit of a disconnect between how we do it. So it's really reliant that if there is a community programme going on, we need that to link in to healthcare workers. So what Green Health Wales is trying to do is support a series of engagement events across Wales. So we're going to North Wales, we're doing different stuff with Canal and River Trust, Outdoor Adventure and Natural Resources Wales to try and link the local healthcare workers to the green prescribing sites so that they're aware of them, so that they go and experience them. So we've got a few events running this year that we will be taking local clinicians to our green sites like Janis's so that they can experience it. And then I think definitely once you start to experience stuff, you start to use it more, and you'll be able to tell your patients more about it. And then the other thing that Green Health Wales is trying to do is create a search engine and a website around connecting patients to this. So where these programmes are taking place, we want our NHS staff and our community to be able to look and see what's in their area so they can go and access it. And then also some of the stuff that's out there that's about what can you do for yourself with a certain condition that's non-pharmaceutical. So what are your options? And so Green Health Wales is working to try and help improve greener social prescribing.
I also asked Sarah what someone should do if they wanted to set up a similar space to Cynon Valley Organic Adventures.
If you've got an idea and you think you would like to help and you're interested, the best thing you can do is start connecting with other people that are interested too. So in Wales, it would be connecting to what's going on in Green Health Wales, finding your local green groups in your hospitals, and that's a bunch of NHS staff actively working for climate smart healthcare. We've got the Climate Change Department in Wales as well. We've got the Future Generations Act. So there's lots of people working on this agenda. So I would definitely start by maybe speaking speaking to your wellbeing linked advisor, seeing what programmes are out there. And there's the Welsh Government Business Development Plan. They offer free support sessions if you have a small eco business. You can get little business grants, set-up grants like that, and they will coach you through all of that. We've also got Climate Cymru, and Climate Cymru sometimes have little development grants that they can give communities. That's a lottery funded organisation, and I definitely say it's sort of where there's a will, there's a way. So, you know, start off small, the community will tell you what it needs, and where things start to work, it can grow quite organically, and that's what allows it to be sustainable, because it grows with what the community needs.
Cynon Valley Organic Adventures seems like such a special project, but the thing that's perhaps the most inspiring about it all is that Janis, by her own admission, was not an expert, or even particularly interested in nature or gardening prior to setting this up. The fact that in just a few years she has taken the place from derelict, overgrown and unusable to a vital and widely renowned community resource is incredibly impressive, but also leads me to feel hope that others in other parts of the UK could easily achieve something similar. That's my take, but I was curious to know what Janis felt was her biggest achievement in getting to this stage.
To be honest, when I took the garden on, you know, I had no money and no skills, so I really couldn't see a future. I didn't think at that point that I'd ever achieve anything with it. So the fact that we own the land now, you know, we have solar energy, we harvest the rainwater. Even though we focus on food growing and well-being, the wildlife is our first priority. So, you know, it's really nice that we have this space which is kind of very circular. Everything works together, and you know, nature supports the individuals just as the individuals are here supporting the site.
You've been listening to the Carbon Copy podcast. For more information about any of the projects or organisations mentioned in this episode, check out the show notes. Many thanks to Janis Werrett, Andrew Cuthbert, Sarah Williams and Mike Jenkins for chatting to us. This episode was co-written and presented by me, Isabel Sparrow, and by Bradley Ingham, who is also our producer and editor. Just to let you know, we'll be taking a short break from the main podcast to make a special mini-series about the Running Out of Time Climate Relay, which will be airing from early June. If you'd like to be the first to hear this and any future episodes, subscribe now. Thanks for listening. Until next time.